Welcome to Unleash Leadership, the podcast where bold leaders and changemakers come together to share their stories, strategies, and insights for creating a lasting impact on society. Carla Blanco is your host. For over 28 years, she has been navigating the complexities of the corporate and government worlds, a journey that's taught her that authentic leadership isn't just about climbing the ladder. It's about lifting others as you rise. Along the way, she uncovered the unwritten rules that drive success, the ones no one tells you about, but that can define your career and legacy. On this podcast, she'll sit down with extraordinary guests from around the globe, leaders, visionaries, and innovators who are leaving their mark on the world. Together, they'll explore their journeys, uncover their tips and tricks, and dive into the challenges they've overcome to inspire you to excel in whatever you're facing. Whether you're climbing the corporate ranks, building your personal brand, or leading change in your community, this podcast is your space to grow, learn, and unleash the leader within. So grab a notebook, get ready to take action, and join us on this journey to unleash our leadership potential. Before we dive in, make sure to follow Carla on Instagram, LinkedIn, at Carla Blanco Coach, Carla with a K, and YouTube at Carla Blanco Show to stay connected and get even more leadership tips and updates.
I am thrilled to introduce Jeffrey Rittner, who is the former Chief Trade Officer and Vice President of the International Trade Group at Intel Corporation. Throughout his 34-year career, he successfully led numerous global teams, influencing the trade environment to advance business strategy, open new market opportunities, ensure compliance, and promote growth. Currently, he serves as a member of the Regulations and Procedures Technical Advisory Committee with the U.S. Bureau of Industry and Security, and as an advisory council member with the Asia Society of Northern California. Additionally, he offers consultation, advice, and feedback on matters related to cross-border trade through Rittner Trade Services, LLC. Jeff, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you here. Well, Jeff, tell us about you, your journey, and why did you engage in global trade?
Great question. The way I answer this question is, when I went to school, I studied international business, and I'd had an opportunity to live outside of the U.S. for a while, and I just knew in my heart that I wanted the job where I could work with people around the world and where I could do business, that would involve multiple countries and transactions across borders and so on. And so that was kind of how I started. I got a job out of school as a export licensing clerk, and eventually I ended up at Intel and spent, more than 30 years. And when I look back today at what I was doing at Intel, I had my dream job. I was working with people all over the world. I was solving complex issues that involved cross-border transactions, and I couldn't have asked for a better job than what I imagined many years earlier. And so when I left Intel, I was thoroughly enjoying every part of what I did in the field.
Oh, that's so exciting. So
Yeah.
you really enjoy the adrenaline because I know that it involves a lot of big challenges in trade, especially in the current global circumstances. And you have navigated cross-border regulations, advanced export controls, and led multinational teams, as you just shared. How do you maintain alignment and trust across diverse geographic, cultural, and regulatory landscapes?
Yeah, it really starts, Carla, for me, just kind of identifying the three things that I think define who I am and how I operate. The first for me was always about, integrity always. The second was people first. And then the third was just teamwork. and really accomplishing things through team. And so, with that in mind, I always felt like as a leader that I needed to establish a clear purpose for the team. And with that, I would call that a vision. And that was always important to me to know it and be able to communicate to my team, this is where we're going. This is what we're here to go accomplish. And so I worked very hard over the years of always, regrouping and reassessing why are we here? What is our purpose? What is it that we're here to do? And so that became kind of the starting point. And then, of course, just ongoing communication was critical from there.
Okay, that is so interesting because transitioning, or I think this is something that we need more leaders that engage the teams to define the purpose, their purpose, because purpose provide direction, and you will see
Yes.
impactful results within the teams.
Right.
And well, in moments when $3 billion dollars in revenue was on the line, what internal compass, and I know you already mentioned
Yeah.
integrity, but it guided your decisions. And I would like you to emphasize, how do you cultivate resilience in yourself and your teams during those high stakes moments?
Yeah, thank you for that question because, what happened over time at Intel for me as a leader is, I was leading a group where we were very transactional and we had to really, make sure that the business kept moving. But over the last number of years, the regulations became so complex and so high visible that we found ourselves, being more and more um, visible to the leadership, to the top leadership. And so we had to start thinking about how do we do our job differently. And so what we came up with, and maybe you're familiar with this concept, but it's a concept called polarities. And a polarity is where you have two things that could be equally as important. And how do you decide? For example, should we be focused on compliance or should we be focused on helping the business grow? And so we really started to, as a leadership team, look at this concept because it was very easy to say, no, we can't do
Yeah.
this. The rule says you can't, but it's much more difficult to figure out how to find a solution. And so when you talk about the 3 billion, there were rules and regulations that would impact that type of money. And so we utilized this polarity concept to move away from a mindset that said it's either or. And we're moved to a mindset that said, how can we find and? How can we be compliant and find a solution for the business? And so this became something that we focused. We actually created a course and we made sure that every trade employee around the world got into small groups, took the course, practiced coming up with solutions and so on. And so we began to change our mindset to look about how we could add value to the company as opposed to just being, trying to protect.
I really love that. Actually, I think that should be a course for every professional around the globe, considering the complexities that we are facing,
Yeah,
and because the easiest will be to say
yeah,
no, it's not
yeah.
possible, but finding solutions is what we really need from every professional.
Yeah, and to address, your very specific question on resilience, one of the things that I learned early on, and I tried to communicate my actions and also my words to my team, was that we are constantly living in a state of chaos. I mean, to me,
Yeah.
chaos is something you can't control. And in the world of trade, even today, it's really difficult to control because there's so much going on and so many changes. And so there's this chaos. And what I would try to help people understand is we have to learn, and it's something to learn how to be comfortable in the chaos, right? Because when you're
Oh,
comfortable in the chaos, then you can shift your mind to finding solutions rather than being overwhelmed by the chaos.
thank you for sharing that. That is so important to embrace the chaos because it is our current environment, and I would say in several aspects of our lives. We really need to become comfortable on that. Well, and talking about that, you work with federal and international agencies. How do you
Yeah.
humanize the process of global compliance and inspire ethical leadership beyond the letter of the law? And
Yeah.
you mentioned about that course, but I would like to get any story or go deeper on that.
Yeah, one of the things when you work in the area of trade is you have to engage or you have to deal with governments. Okay, as you said, we engage with governments and so on. And what I found was the to help my team is to start to realize that the government is part of the team. Right? Everybody always sees the government as, oh, well, stay away, don't talk to the government. And I came out of an environment early back years ago where that was kind of the thought here in Silicon Valley to, well, don't engage with the government. But I found the opposite. I found that the government is part of the team. I mean,
Yeah.
they need us for them to accomplish their mission. And we need the government to be able to accomplish our mission. And so what I began to realize is we had to establish relationships with the government. We had to be able to help understand where they were coming from and help them understand our point of view. In fact, one of the things that we adopted, one of my leaders came up with this idea, and we did this 3 or 4 times, is we would actually invite senior engineers who were maybe really knowledgeable about a particular technology, and we would invite them to Washington to meet with various government agencies, the people that establish the rules, right? And so we would simply, we'd have what we called it a technology day. And that technology day was a day for the regulators to learn about a technology. Like, for example, 5G. When 5G was first, going to be launched, and everybody, oh my gosh, 5G, we have to control this. And so we met and we had a technology day, and we brought in the experts on 5G, and we educated the government on 5G. No ask, just pure give. And that allowed them to understand the technology. So when they wanted to go make a rule, they had a better understanding. And when they didn't understand something, they knew who to come to. And so we established a relationship over time. And that was not just the technical, but also the actual regulations themselves and so on. And so that getting comfortable establishing a relationship with the government was really critical.
That's great because you built trust and credibility. So then you became the who to call in case of questions. And well, and you are known for making the complex simple. So, are there any strategies that you can share when explaining nuanced export controls or
Yep.
geopolitical shifts to C-suite executives who need clarity without compromise? So, when and you are mentioning taking those engineers to talk with the government, how do you manage the
Yeah.
C-suite executives?
Yeah, I had early in my career, Carla, I had several mentors who were really good at this. Because I worked for a technology company, right? And so, how do you explain technical truths and principles in a very simple way? And when you deal with the government, you have to be simple, right? So I had those mentors that taught me that. And in fact, in my career, I was thinking back on this. I was always trying to find simple. I remember when I used to do presentations, everybody would have their slide deck, right? The 10 slides. I would always try to come up with 1 or 2 slides. I wanted to tell my story on 1 or 2 slides so I could keep it simple. You can't, if you have 10 slides, you can go all over the place, right? But if you have to do 1 or 2 slides, you have to be simple in your messaging. I would always have this idea when I was writing, especially upper management, C-suite, to reduce, reduce, reduce. And you can probably talk to my chief of staff, you could talk to some of my leadership team. We would be working on some communication, and we would go over and over, and we'd be done, and I'd say, well, let's go over this again, let's read it again, and we'd come up with another couple words. Well, what does that really mean? And we would define it or take it out, and it was just reduce and reduce. In fact, what I realized, and I told my team, was when you think about the C-suite, and how many meetings have you been in, Carla, where the C-suite is sitting in the meeting and they're looking at their phone, right? They do most of their work on their phone. So if you send them this 4-page document that explains some regulation or some issue, they're going to be scrolling and then forget it. And so I learned that you got to make it so simple that it could be on the one or two swipes on the phone, but they can get the point by just simply
Mm.
looking at their phone.
Love it. Thank you for that. That is a great advice for young professionals and from different cultures, because there are some cultures like Latin America and some countries in Asia that I find we provide so much context that you can confuse the room. You really need
Yes.
to be succinct and go
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
point. That is great advice. Thank you so much for that. And I would like to know how to stay grounded in your
Yeah.
purpose
Yeah.
as a leader while working at the intersection of ever shifting policies, technology,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
global politics.
Yeah. Yeah. One more point back on the complex, and then I'll answer that because it's an important point. Just for people to understand, one of the ways that you can measure that you were simple, in your communication, or at least I did, was when I sent a message up to the C-suite, my measurement was no questions. If no questions came back, then I must have got through, because I had lots of times when what do you mean by this? What does this mean? So I used to make that kind of my gauge to try to make sure that there were no questions. In terms of just the purpose, staying grounded in your purpose, I'll go back again to the vision. I can't tell you how many times I sat down with my team and we would spend time really asking ourselves, why are we here? Why is the company paying for this group to be here? And what are we actually here to do for the company? And so with that, we would debate and debate, and we would try to come up with a very simple statement that we could all rally around. And so we came up with things like, we exist, to ensure a barrier-free trade environment so that the company can sell, around the world. But we would come up with very simple statements that everybody would know this is why we exist. We're here to remove barriers, right, and make the company's work simpler. So that was the first one. The second, I think, is inspiration. Once you have a clear purpose, then you have to figure out as a leader, how do you inspire? How do you take that and make it inspirational so that somebody wants to adopt that and run with it? And then finally, it's so important to monitor and measure. And we used OKRs, right? We would have quarterly
Mhm.
objectives, and those objectives were always tied to, we started with our vision or our purpose, and then we had our priorities for the year, and then every objective and key result was put under one of those priorities. And that's what we had from the top all the way to the bottom. That's what everybody marched to for that quarter.
And that's critical because that also provides a connection to employees of the value that they are adding to
Mhm.
the vision of the company and the purpose of the company, connecting all the dots. Thank you
Mhm.
for sharing
Certainly.
that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you drove initiatives across 70 countries. How do
Mhm.
cultural intelligence and emotional awareness shape your approach to leadership?
Yeah, that I'll say was a journey, right? Because as a U.S. multinational company, we were so U.S. centric
Yeah.
in everything we did. And what helped me as I grew as a leader is the more I got out and I traveled and I met with people, like going to Costa Rica, I learned so much about the culture and about how the employees in that culture thought and how they operated. And I remember going to Costa Rica many times. So loved meeting with the people because they were so excited and enthusiastic about the work, and they would tell me what they wanted to do and what they wanted to accomplish. So spending time with people, and so I would try to travel as much as I could. When I had an opportunity to lead not only trade but also government affairs for Intel, I mean, this was new to me, and so one of the first things I did was I got on a plane. And that year, I had 200,000 miles. I went to all the sites where there were government affairs employees because I wanted to understand who they were, what were
Mhm.
they there to do, and what was important to them. And I learned so much from each person. And then I'll say, Carla, the next big event for me was when we had the pandemic, and I couldn't travel.
Mhm.
So it was a crisis moment for me because that's how I operated. What was I going to do? And so I started to realize I have to find another way. So my leadership team and I came up with this concept called Jeff's All Around the World Virtual Tour. And so I would, once a quarter, I would meet with everybody around the world. And not all at once. What we did was we broke up the teams by regions. And so I would have a group of 30 people and we'd get in a call and I would just give them a few things that's going on. And then I'd just open it up. What do you guys want to talk about? Help me understand. And that was really, really valuable for me. And I'll give you one quick story. One time we had it broken up by regions and we were supposed to have the people in China as part of the Asia. And we were on the call and I realized after a while there was nobody from China. So I quickly IM'd to my chief of staff, what's up? Turns out that they weren't invited, they were forgotten off the list.
Oh.
So I quickly created another meeting the next day so I could meet with China. And it was really interesting, Carla, because when we normally had the meeting with Asia, the folks in China were not very verbal. They didn't say a lot. They didn't ask a lot of questions. They listened. They're a little bit more shy. When I had the China-only meeting, I couldn't believe all the questions and the things they asked and the things they shared and so on. And it taught me that there are cultural differences and you have to be able to be sensitive to those. And if you realize that from that point forward, we had an Asia meeting and we had a China meeting. So I could get a much better conversation.
Thank you for sharing that because I think it's critical for leaders to understand how important it is to connect with their teams. And especially when they are around the globe and we are working online, opening the camera, connecting human to human really drive impactful results. And if you could pass on one principle to the next generation of trade and compliance leaders, something not found in regulation or policy book, what it will be? What is that unwritten rule that you will pass on them?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think if I was, and I think I did this when I left Intel because I had an opportunity to give my final. And my point was always deliver impactful results. That is, as long as you're delivering results that are impactful to the company, you will be relevant, you will be sought after, and you will add incredible value. So I think that would be my advice. And with that, I think you can deliver impactful results, right? But I think there's also an element of being able to communicate those results. And we as compliance professionals, I can't tell how hard I worked on this. We are so good about telling you what we did and how we did it, right? And I would have people come and submit awards and they would have this great thing. We did this and we did that and we went over and talked to this person. And I would say, so what? And then they would go on again and I'd say, so what? Who cares? And I finally would try to get them to the point where they would be able to actually articulate what was the result. So for example, I submitted an export license. I got a license, it came through. So what? That's what we're here to do. So, but then we realized was that license was approved for $3 billion worth of business. So to change the message was rather than I got an export license, I enabled $3 billion of revenue by going and getting an export license and changing the way we articulate what that value is, that result that we deliver is so important. And that's something we worked a lot on as a team to do that. Communication
is critical. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I really appreciate that you explain what impact means because it is so important. And I think it was a great example. Yeah. Any mentor in your journey that influenced your leadership approach?
There's probably two in particular I'll mention, and then maybe your broad one. But, I had my first manager at Intel. I had her for 15 years. Her name was Sandy. You might have known her. And, she really taught me the importance of people. She was a people manager. And I was in those early days, I was very procedure oriented, very task oriented. And sometimes I would just run over people. And so I had to learn over time that, it's working with people and through people that you accomplish great things. And so that was a really good example for me to learn from. The second one, that was a woman named Mary, and we went through a crisis where because we didn't have the right export authorizations in Europe, we almost had to shut down our Irish factory. We
Wow.
became within days of shutting it down. So you can imagine the pressure of that.
Famous.
I wasn't really in charge of Europe at the time, but I had jumped in because I saw there was an issue and I wanted to solve it, but I got blamed for it. Everybody was pointing at Rittner. And so I was pretty down. I felt like, what am I going to do? And I met Mary, and Mary said to me, Jeff, it's not the issue. It's not what happened. That's not what everybody's concerned about. What they're really looking at is, how are you handling it? That's what people are looking at. That's what they want to see. How are you handling this crisis? And that just hit me like, oh my gosh, that's something I can do. I can focus on resolving this issue, focus on my own communication, my own way I behave and the way I work through it. And that became kind of a standard for me, is to constantly be thinking about, everybody is watching. They're all watching. And so how do I show up, and how do I resolve issues, and how do I work with people? So those were probably two mentors that meant a lot.
I really appreciate that. And what about challenges that you faced? Well, that was a big one.
Yes.
And how did you navigate through them? You are sharing that how you show up make the
Yeah.
difference, but are there
Yeah.
any other challenges that you would like to share?
Yeah, there are two, I think, Carla, that jump out at me. One was when early on when I began to lead the global trade group, I only had the U.S. team reporting to me, and all of the people who were doing trade work reported into the local finance controller. And as I tried to create this global trade team, it was really difficult because the finance controller had a different priority, had a different budget, and so on. And so it was very difficult. So I had to really think through, how are we going to do this? So I decided that I am going to manage or lead a global trade organization. It doesn't matter who reports to me or not. As long as we are here to focus on trade and bring value to the company on trade, we're going to work together. So I created this concept of, we are one global trade propelling Intel forward. And so it became that rallying cry. And it didn't matter where people reported, we were all part of the trade group. And eventually, 5 or 6 years later, I finally was able to actually get everybody reporting. But that was a huge challenge for me to learn how to accomplish the goal globally, even though I didn't have, them reporting to me. The
Wow,
second,
that's a great example. Mhm.
yeah, the second one, and this one it was a hard one. I told you that I was asked to lead the government affairs, and I did that for almost 2 years, and it was an incredible learning. And the challenge for me was that when I took over, when I was asked to lead, I was so excited. There was so much I wanted to do, and the pandemic hit. And all of a sudden, I shared with you earlier how I like to be with people and meet. I couldn't do that. I had to do everything online. And video, many people didn't want to get on video in those days, And so that was a huge challenge to learn how to communicate, during a time where you couldn't do how you normally did. So I had to kind of learn a lot of communication skills. And from that, I'll just quickly fast forward. From that, after Pat Gelsinger, the new CEO, came on board, Pat realized that he needed somebody to run government affairs that was in Washington, was a long-standing political connected person, and I was not that person. And so I was asked to go back and run the trade group. So in a lot of ways, I went through a lot of emotional, was that a demotion? Was that, what actually happened here? And I had to kind of process that emotionally and intellectually. And what I came out of that learning was that every opportunity that we're given is a learning opportunity. And the 2 years I spent running global affairs, government affairs, I learned so much. And now I had an opportunity to go back to my passion and what I'm really good at and I know. And so it's another opportunity to learn and to create a trade group that had been kind of messed up because it was put in government affairs and it was back out. So I had an opportunity to recreate that trade group. And so I could turn a situation that could have been devastating into a real positive experience.
Oh, that requires resilience and strength because you move yourself out of the way, understanding and transforming a challenge into an opportunity.
Right.
So I think that is really, really valuable. And I also like the other example because you were leading before you got the title.
Yeah.
And again, this is critical for people to learn that it is not about you, it's about the results that you are delivering because you deliver first results, getting everyone together, the global trade team, and then you got
Yeah.
the position. So
Right.
that's really nice. And thank you for sharing and for being so vulnerable. And let's move to accomplishments. Is there any big accomplishment that you would like to share that you feel proud of?
Yeah, one of the things that I encouraged my team early on when I began to lead the whole team was to help them see themselves as a critical part of the company. Because oftentimes we didn't see that. We saw ourselves as compliant, but we were so important. And I challenged the team. I said, what we're going to do is, when we did our OKRs every year, our goal is we will at least submit an Intel Achievement Award nomination. And an Intel Achievement Award is the highest award you could get at Intel. And nobody ever thought the trade group could ever get. I mean, people that invented things, people that saved billions, people, they were the people that got these awards. How could the trade? But I set that as a goal. And happy to say that we as an organization received two IAAs, two Intel Achievement Awards. One of them was for the huge amount of money we saved with tariffs back in 2018. And the second one was the export licensing work we did to try to, save revenue through getting licenses. And I was so proud of the team because this was a team effort. The team did this, and I was able to go to these events and see the team recognized with an IAA, which was unthinkable when I first started.
I love that. That's a visionary leader right there. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Well, we are at the end of this great time. Thank you for sharing all those nuggets of wisdom. What unleash leadership means to you?
Unleash leadership. Let me start with what it doesn't mean. And I think we've talked about this. It's not about a position. It's not about a promotion. It's not about priorities and process. It's not about power. And for me, it's about passion.
Mm.
It's something that you're passionate about. And it's passionate for a purpose, right? When you have a purpose and you're passionate as a leader, it's contagious. It's passion for the people. I mean, when you're passionate about the people that you're leading, right, they feel empowered and they feel valued. And finally, it's passion about the team. That as a team, what can we actually accomplish together? And I think to me, that's what unleashing leadership is being able to unleash that passion for a purpose and for people and the team.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for sharing,
Yeah.
Jeff. Thank you for
Yeah.
your time.
Yeah.
And well, I hope to see you anytime soon.
Yes, hopefully we'll see you. I understand you're in the US, so maybe we'll catch each other somewhere.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, we will need to catch each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
and hope you have a great rest of your day.